Hey guys, Steve Pletz of Steve Pletz and Team here with my business partners Thad and Janice of the Clendenin Group. I thought that what we could do today is we had a very interesting experience with that, which is that Thad and Janice recently sold their property in Ramona and bought another home in Ramona. And it's not often that as agents we kind of get to go through the experience ourselves of doing the process. And so Thad's been selling real estate since 2006. Janice has now been 6 or 7 years. So certainly quite a bit of time there. But what I thought I would do is just kind of ask you guys some of the questions. Let's start on the list side of number one. As a team, what we tend to do is we have a stager that comes through and goes through your space and makes some recommendations about furniture, maybe brings in some supplemental things, maybe removes some of the things. I just kind of want to know your feelings as it related to that. Thad, maybe we'll start with you.
So, I mean, if we're being honest, that's more of a Janice thing, right? When we get into the space scenario. But first I'll say, it was interesting for me because Steve, obviously, he's the team lead with us. He was also our agent in this instance, and we're still communicating. So that's a good side to the professionalism that Steve Pletz and team has. But with respect to, staging company coming in, staging company was awesome, by the way. But I would say, when you're not, when you haven't done it before, because obviously with speaking for myself personally, I had never been involved with, as a consumer with a stager. It definitely is an experience, because you're trying to, you think you've thinned your property out enough, and then they get there and realize, you realize that you haven't. And so, but I think you're probably better to speak on this than I am.
Yeah, I would just say make sure you have time to prepare because it does take a little bit more effort. It's so worth it. The stager that we use, Lisa, is amazing. I would highly recommend it. It's well worth it. It gives you a new perspective on your home and other ideas going into your next home. But the key thing for me was just needing time to prepare. You have to pack things away ahead of time and make space for new stuff. So, but well worth it.
It's beautifully said, because certainly the experience for most sellers, including you guys, was a little bit of the feeling of there's stuff that needs to be done on the inside, there's stuff that needs to be done on the outside. Lisa and her crew are able to assist, but there's some things that get left in your hand, like, hey, we want to put in some plants here. And so then you're running to Home Depot in order to dig them out and then do all that in order to prep it. Talk to me then as it relates to showings, which is you guys have a couple of dogs.
Yep. Bo and Ellie. And And so, to that point with showings, we often say when we're in front of clients, we don't, when you're listed, that's not how you live. Right. And that's the thing, is that you have to separate those two things. And it very much is, as soon as we were staged and, had a pod and loaded a bunch of stuff out and all that, suddenly we went from living in our home. For me, it felt like then we went to living in a hotel room or something, in a space that no longer is your own. That's the idea, and so you have to get used to that. But feedback again for, Lisa and her team coming in, and to Steve's credit too with the stage, every single person that came through, I think, commented on the home and how it was presented. And the other part, and this is an absolute compliment, it didn't feel like it was staged.
Right.
Some of these properties are so stagey.
They can feel cold, for sure.
Feel cold.
And I think that also, and for that circumstance of when you guys sold the property, Thad was running around a bunch, and I would say Janice had to deal with the majority of the showings, right?
Very fair.
And dealing with an agent that says, hey, I'll be there at 1:30 but doesn't show up till 2:15, or shows up at 12:30 and says, hey, I'm a little early, is it okay if I make this work? Tell me about your experience as it related to that.
Yeah, that was sometimes a challenge, but really you have to be a little bit flexible. You just have to realize the end goal. So people are going to say negative things about your home. I tried to step out a lot just to give them privacy, because I know that's important for people to have the space to think through something when they without someone else there. So just keep that all into perspective. You're going. You're selling your house for a reason. You're not hanging on to it. So any kind of negative feedback you have that comes through, just let it go. It's part of the process.
Yeah, you have to like self-moderate a little
Yeah.
bit, emotionally from that standpoint. And to your credit, you did great. I know you always speak to one of my inherent strengths, which is flexibility. But there is that you kind of have to adapt and be flexible and overcome some of those things that normally.
Can we and the viewers, all 6 of them that we have, pry into how did your marriage do during that time?
Great. Again, probably Janice's credit because she kind of came in and was always more patient, I think, than me. But no, it was fine. I think it's just everybody has to be talking, and Steve and us, we were talking all the time, both on feedback, on what we need to be looking for when there was probably threat of offers coming in, all those kinds of things, and what we're ultimately what we're going to be dealing with, how we're going to respond.
Yeah, we were fortunate. It did strengthen us. I know a lot of people, it kind of can be the opposite. There's a lot of things going on for people when they're in that process. So you have to remember to not take things personally, to not personalize someone else's frustration, or and just take the joys, and you're in it together. That's an overused phrase, but it is true, and it's important to stick together in that process.
I love it. It's so beautifully said. And so the listing certainly was a success and the purchase was a success, but you did those kind of simultaneously. Let's talk about then the negotiation and that process as it relates to the purchase, which is you were able to find something because of the context that you have that was off market, which there are pros and cons to.
Right.
But then talk a little bit about that purchasing side, especially having a property that at the time was, remind me, were we in escrow?
Yeah, we weren't quite in escrow. And this is actually a lovely story because before this last escrow, my beard was all brown.
Yeah.
And so Steve, to his credit, also, I remember we were in our family room having a conversation, and it became, whether or not we hold on to a contingency to find or close escrow on the replacement property. We all talked, and much to my chagrin at the time, Steve convinced us not to have a contingency, meaning if we didn't close escrow on our purchase property, we still had to sell our primary home.
And so what you're talking about is the seller contingency.
Right.
Yeah, what the acronym is the SPRP, allowing so that the buyer would purchase your property, the property that you were selling, but then that they would have the ability in order to back out of that deal.
Correct.
And what I tried to encourage was the idea of let's burn the safety net here and let's proceed that allows for our buyer to proceed, and thus we can proceed.
And it turned out to be a really smart play, and Steve, convinced us to basically, with the offer that we had and with the dynamics that the buyers who were purchasing our property had in terms of selling their home and those kinds of things, it all made sense. I almost broke sobriety, but didn't. It ultimately turned out really well. But again,
you and I are laughing. Janice is not laughing.
Not at all. But I think it really, sometimes it's cliche or overstated, but it really does come down to trusting your advisor, your counselor, your agent, your advocate, if you will, and having a level of trust that sometimes you have to get over yourself, in that scenario.
Absolutely.
And it's hard.
And I think that is the big takeaway, honestly, is that it's hard. And I can't stress it enough, the importance that you work with a professional, that you work with somebody that understands the market, that you work with somebody that understands the contracts and understands your leverage, or when you're in a strong position or a weak position, or those kinds of things. We can help you, and we certainly are here to help in any possible way that we can. And we look forward to connecting with you very, very soon as you think about selling a property and buying another. Let's make it happen.